Forbes magazine just estimated last week that the average credit card APR in your networks is 28.75%. Average. 29%, let's call it. 29%. It's nearly doubled in the last 4 years. That is astounding.
Mr. Trump, you talked about a 10% cap on interest rates for credit cards. That's a great idea. Well, you know what, John? I'm going to introduce that legislation.
And guess what? Senator Bernie Sanders, along with Senator Josh Hawley, did just that. They have now officially introduced legislation with this bipartisan support in an effort to cap credit card interest rates. Now, when I say bipartisan support, we're going to wait and see how much bipartisan support we're really talking about. But nonetheless, Josh Hawley, who is a Republican, has been very vocal in pushing for this type of legislation. But will Donald Trump follow through on his campaign promise? Because he himself had previously said on the campaign trail that he wants to cap credit card interest rates. So look, we'll come back to Donald Trump, but first it's important to understand what's in this bill, what it's actually going to do. According to the press release put out by Sanders and Hawley, the Sanders-Hawley bill would immediately cap credit card interest rates at 10%. The legislation would be in effect for 5 years. I don't know why it wouldn't just be permanent, but maybe economic changes, they want to revisit it, who knows? But still, it's a great start. They want to cap it at 10% for 5 years. So why are these two typically ideologically opposed lawmakers joining forces? Well, this bipartisan bill comes after a recent Forbes report found that the average credit card interest rate is 28.6%, even though banks are able to borrow money from the Federal Reserve at less than 4.5%. So look, I get it. You want to charge an interest rate high enough to turn a profit. But think about that profit. Banks borrow the money at 4.5%, and then they loan it out at 28.6%. That's insane. So last year, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau found that over the last 10 years, average APR on credit cards, assessed interest rate almost doubled from 12.9% in late 2023 to 22.8% in 2023. And that's the highest level recorded since the Federal Reserve began collecting this data in 1994. And while customers suffer, the banks are absolutely making out like bandits. I mean, clearly. So in 2023, excess APR margin may have cost the average cardholder over $250. Major credit card companies earned an estimated $25 billion in additional interest revenue by raising APR margins. So the Sanders-Hawley press release also notes that in 2022, credit card companies charged a whopping $130 billion in interest rates and fees. And this is something that I've talked about on the show before, but I really want to reiterate it because credit card debt right now is at an all-time high. We're talking about $1.17 trillion in credit card debt, outstanding credit card debt. And as of 2023, the average household had over $21,000 in credit card debt. And I remember doing stories about student loan debt, especially when it surpassed $1 trillion. You have to keep in mind that that's bad. That's definitely bad. But usually, if we're talking about federal student loans, the interest rates are not 28%. They're much, much lower. Now we're talking about credit card debt at $1.17 trillion with an average 28% interest rate. That is crazy. It is crushing Americans. And I'm happy that Hawley and Sanders have teamed up to do this. Now, before we get to the Donald Trump angle of this, I want to hear your thoughts on the bipartisan effort that we're seeing in the Senate, Was.
I mean, I think it's important that when Republicans claim to be for things that we care about, that we take them at their word. And I think that's what Bernie Sanders is trying to do here. It's like he doesn't see any inconsistencies in terms of his own agenda and project with working with the Republicans, so long as it's something that he believes in. And this is something that hurts working ordinary people. So it fits right into the Sanders agenda. And, Josh Hawley, along with JD Vance and a couple of others in the Republican GOP, are people who are self-proclaimed members of the, new right, a more populist, less neoliberal segment of the right wing. And some people would say, oh, they're full of crap. They don't really believe in any of that, which may be true. We may be proven to be wrong about that. But Bernie Sanders drafting a bill that is so obviously in favor of working people and working families, and doing so with a Republican, I don't see anything wrong with that at all. I'm not one of these people who thinks if a Republican breathes on something, it's got cooties and we need to stay away from it.
Yeah, in fact, strategically speaking, I think this is brilliant, a brilliant move by Senator Sanders, because if these Republican lawmakers and Donald Trump himself are in fact full of crap, this is the way you find out. And this is something that you can run with. I mean, Bernie Sanders is serving in his last term in the Senate. So it's not about him running with it. But if Republicans vote against capping the credit card interest rates, well, Democrats, if they're smart, would run their reelection campaigns on that issue and make it abundantly clear that these Republican lawmakers are not what they say they are. They don't care about the working class in this country. They only pretend to in order to win elections. And I mean, look at what's going on with these credit card companies. It's kind of insane. So companies are making a lot of revenue through charging these extremely high interest rates. So in the last 5 years, for instance, Visa made $67.5 billion in profits and paid its executive chair and former CEO, Alfred Kelly Jr., nearly $140 million in total compensation. MasterCard made $44.3 billion in profits, not revenue, profits, and paid its CEO, Michael Maybach, $77.7 million in total compensation. And American Express made $33.8 billion in profits and paid their CEO $157.2 million in total compensation. So Senator Sanders says the credit card companies are engaged in extortion and loan sharking. And Josh Hawley agrees, saying that working Americans are drowning in record credit card debt, while the biggest credit card issuers get richer and richer by hiking their interest rates to the moon. It's not just wrong, it's exploitative, and it needs to end. Capping credit card interest rates at 10%, just like President Trump campaigned on, is a simple way to provide meaningful relief to working people. Let's do it. And as Sanders and Hawley said, on the campaign trail, Trump actually voiced support for capping credit card interest rates at 10%. Let's take a look.
And while working Americans catch up, we're going to put a temporary cap on credit card interest rates at 10%. We have no choice. They're getting 22, 25%. We can't let people have to pay 25% and 22% interest because they can't afford to pay off their credit card. We're going to cap it for a period of time at 10%.
There you heard it. Clear as day. You hear the audience. They love it. You hear Hawley say, basically reference Donald Trump and what he allegedly wants to do. Now he's going to have to prove whether he actually meant it. And look, there's no doubt that he's going to face a lot of pressure from his corporate backers. He does have corporate backers. He has Wall Street lobbyists attempting to get him to abandon this plan. When he first proposed the cap to the American Bankers Association, or when he first proposed the cap, the American Bankers Association immediately shot it down. Obviously, that's what they're going to do. And they did so again today, and they were definitely not alone. So here were the hilarious comments from Michael Strain, who's the director at the American Enterprise Institute.
I don't like this policy at all. I think you've got a situation where Bernie Sanders is for something, the progressive left is for something, and the kind of populist nationalist right is for it. And typically when those two groups are agreeing, the policy is bad. This is a policy that is effectively a price control. This is a policy that would lead credit card lenders not to extend credit to people with relatively low credit scores, people who are kind of just getting started in their careers, or people who, for whatever reason, have a low score. Those are often people who really need credit. The only way it makes sense to lend to them is to charge them a high rate of interest because their default risk is higher. And so this is a kind of classic example of a policy with that's designed with really good intentions, but that would end up hurting the very people that it's designed to help.
My credit score is 820. I don't say that to brag. I am risk averse. I'm very careful with my finances, and I live below my means. Okay. I checked my interest rates on my credit cards. 28%. Doesn't matter if you have good credit. They want to make money. Okay. It doesn't matter if you have good credit, bad credit. They're going to charge you a high interest rate. And the idea that credit card companies are no longer going to engage in this business if they're only going to make 10% interest is laughable. But maybe he's right. I don't know. What do you think, Waz?
I was struck by the idea that the low credit score having people they're gonna die without the $300, $500 credit card that we start folks off with. What are they gonna do without this $300 a month that we're price gouging the hell out of them with, ridiculous interest rate? It's absurd. It's obviously insane. The guy had a horrible argument. It's just basically well, these guys are agreeing, so it must be bad. He can't go point for point why it's going to hurt American consumers. That's just wrong. Obviously, he has no leg to stand on, and that's why he sounded so ridiculous trying to defend this so obviously predatory practice. There's nothing to it. You can't make the argument that the feds raised interest rates on us and we got to cover it and we're providing the money up front. And bro, you can't justify it if you're 7xing your interest rates when you now give it to the American consumer.
Yeah, totally agree. And I'm going to skip ahead to what happened during Donald Trump's first term. Now, look, we have different lawmakers. Some people got voted out, so things might be different this time around. But if we take what happened in Trump's first term as an example, if we see it as a foreshadowing of what's to come, we're not going to be too optimistic. So during Trump's first term in the White House, Sanders and Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez introduced legislation that would have capped credit card interest rates at 15%. Get a load of this, though, just 9 Democrats in the House and 1 in the Senate co-sponsored the bill, which received 0 Republican support, none. So I still think that Sanders should move forward with this strategy because, again, even if it suffers the same fate as the bill that was proposed in Trump's first term, it's something that Democrats can use to their advantage. They can point to it and say, look, these Republicans are pretending to be for the working class, but this proves that they're not. Will they do that? They didn't do it after the first term where this bill failed, but who knows?
If you enjoyed this video, that's because of our members. They make us independent, they make us strong, and they make us honest. Become a member today by hitting the join button below.